Hi everyone, welcome to our next episode. I'm Naveen Sabah, and my friend Karthik is here as well. And today we have with us Mania Saran. Mania is currently an associate at Bain and Company, which is a consulting firm. She went to Ashoka University, and yeah, we're super excited to have you, Mania. Do you want to quickly tell us about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Naveen. Thank you, Karthik. I'm extremely excited to be here. As you mentioned, I am an associate consultant at Bain and Company in India. So I've been working here for about a little bit over a year and a half. So it's been a very interesting experience. And prior to this, I was at Ashoka University, like you said. I actually majored in psychology, which has not a lot to do with what I'm doing right now, but I try and combine it in the small ways that I can. And I think it's been a very interesting experience, sort of doing both things in the last 5-6 years. So yeah, extremely excited to be here, and I hope I can contribute something that will be useful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Mania.
Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to go back to like your childhood days or something and tell us maybe how did you get interested in psychology? Like yeah, just general.
Sure. So actually, I grew up in India, and my mum is a human resource consultant. So, psychology was a very early part of my life in some ways, because my playthings as a child used to be her psychometric reports, because essentially she helps pocket readers,
Yeah.
etc., do better at work and feel better, be more productive, have greater well-being. So obviously I didn't understand anything, but my office toys used to include sort of her reports and her work. So I think that did play an early role. But in school, I think once I started to pursue the subject, I had a really fantastic sort of psychology teacher who, in 11th standard, in fact, who used to talk about how psychology is everywhere. So she, in fact, used to even sometimes bring a newspaper to class and tell you, okay, listen, we're studying this today, and this is what's happening in the world. So sometimes we would talk about social biases, and we would discuss sort of, everything that happens in the world that contributes to it. She used to send us to visits to the supermarket and say, okay, what are people picking? Why do you think someone is being attracted to this product versus the other? Which, in fact, I work with retailers now. So I think it's a very, very interesting way to sort of see the world as something that can be studied from the context of human behavior and people. So I think that's what kicked it off in the beginning. Yeah.
I think that's so interesting because I think like the exercise you teach whilst you guys do psychology is almost everywhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
like in marketing and all of that. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that already covered a little bit about my next question, which was who are your role models from your early life and any specific mentors? I think you already said that it was your mother and one of your teachers. So
Yeah.
maybe you could just tell us one specific thing that really blew your mind when talking to your mother or just having discussions with her or anything else, any story you want to share.
Sure. Actually, I was thinking about role models in general, and I think I have more in terms of, not just psychology. I feel like, the discipline you pursue is one part of it. So, of course, there were many conversations with my mother that frequently blow my mind, but I think more
Yeah.
in terms of I love learning, and I think through my life, I've always pursued something or the other than what I'm simply doing. So I've had so many teachers. So I've learned how to sing since I was a child. I play the sitar. So that was something that I spent a
Wow.
lot of time on. So, and more recently, I took up Kathak very late in life, actually, because most people start as children, but
Oh,
I started in my 20s. But I've had such good teachers when so many, like, when you talk to only people in your discipline, there are only the same things that you hear pretty much, and a lot of it is academics and whatever, which I was always very geared in that direction already. So it was very nice for me to have an outlet with these artistic people, people who had a passion to do something else, who talked about Hindustani classical music, or they talked about dance, and those philosophies, I think, had a huge role to play in making me feel more like multi-dimensional instead of just being one studious child who did one thing. So I think those
yeah.
people also I would definitely count as my as role models, or people who I think shaped me in a pivotal way. So yeah, I think that would be an answer to the role model question. But I think talking about conversations with people, I think in general, I feel like I've had some very good teachers even in college, and even my mom has had a huge role to play in my thesis and so on. So maybe when we get into that, I can talk a bit more about it.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. I know you went to Ashoka University to study psychology and stuff. Yeah, how was like the whole process of choosing the university, getting in, and yeah, you should tell us about the college experience that you had.
Yeah, okay. I didn't always plan to go to Ashoka. I don't know how much you guys know about the place, but it is really new. Like, I think we just celebrated our 10th birthday, so we're actually quite young. We
Oh,
started in 2014.
okay.
Yeah. So, I always had a thing for psych, and I'd always known that this is what I want to study. So I was thinking of applying to the UK, and I did apply, and I did get in, to some good colleges. But what
Oh,
happened,
wow.
was that I applied to Ashoka, and then the liberal arts sort of started to attract me, and I started to think that, okay, if I go to, say, a UCL, or I go to a King's or whatever, they will ask me to specialize, and I'm 18. Do I really know that this is what I want to do? And there was a slight doubt in my mind that I don't want to become a therapist. And that actually drove that thing of, if I don't want to become a therapist, am I sure that I want to only do psychology, or is it just something I like and I want to explore? And just that idea of having that freedom and having that flexibility was really attractive. So I went to Ashoka. I thought I'll try it out, and within a week I was like sold. Like, they just talked about their classes, and they yeah. So I think applying to them was a very interesting experience as well. I think it was the only essay that I think I wrote completely on my own. Nobody helped me. Nobody, like, I think one person proofread it apart from me.
Yeah.
And going to college in a place like that, I think because it's so new, they're also trying to do different things. The professors are very geared to making a difference. They model themselves a lot more similarly to, like, universities in the UK. I'd done summer school, in fact, at Duke, and I'd made up,
Oh,
like, at that time, I had this feeling, I want to study in this manner. And Ashoka, I think, really, in terms of its pedagogy, in terms of its way of teaching, was very much like that, in the sense that it was I didn't rote learn once in my entire time at Ashoka, where, in Indian schools, you do have to do
have to
well.
go to,
But
yeah.
I think academically, I peaked in Ashoka because there was so much more understanding and writing essays and thinking and communicating in classrooms. It really built me up. And I met some of my, like, closest friends over there, and it was 4 very good years. And this is 1.5 being COVID impacted. Still, I think it was the most fulfilling experience, I think. And yeah, I still miss the place since.
Yeah, that's actually so interesting because I feel like most colleges in India, like they don't like have like the kind of education that you were talking about in terms of like liberal arts and stuff. And like you mentioned, just like IITs, like rote learning, memorizing stuff. So I think
Yeah,
it's unique. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, I meet so many people who go to these colleges, because I mean, if you go to Bain, right, it's just surrounded by people who've done very well for themselves. Like, since they were like 16, 17, they have cracked these huge IITs, and they must have done very well at IIT also to
Yeah.
then come to such a prestigious firm. And you talk about your experiences and their experiences, and everyone has learned a lot, right? So, but I think with Ashoka, there is that element of, you did something a little bit differently to how things have been happening. And then people also are curious that, was this good? Was this bad? How do you feel about it? And I think it was a very gratifying experience for me personally. I feel like everyone has their own preferences in terms of how they like to study, but I really enjoyed learning differently.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Were there like any like specific classes or like I guess courses that you found very like helpful that built you up the most, or professors, I guess?
I'll talk about two. So there was one course on behavioral economics, which obviously it makes sense that I would enjoy it because it really straddles
Yeah.
both things that I do. But that course was very interesting because it was talking about, it really combines, it was an economics course actually, but it was also being offered to psychology students, and it really combines sort of the things that we learn in psychology and in behavioral science, which was a personal interest of mine. It wasn't something that was offered as a major or a specialization or something. I just happened to pick courses that catered to it. But in terms of, say, what kind of systems attract your attention, where are humans fallible? Like, economics theories assume that everybody is always rational or everybody is always profit minded. Where do we see altruism come up? Like, so that was a very cool course from that perspective. And there was another course that was taken by one of my favorite professors. She's actually a very interesting person to talk to as well, because she's a behavioral science researcher who also taught at SID, so at business school at Oxford. So she brought a very different perspective to personality psychology. So she talked about, do we even have a personality? How does it manifest in the workplace? How does it, are we different at work than we are at home? What is introversion? Do we cater enough to introverts in the workplace? So some very cool stuff. Like, if you ask me specifically about any of them, I could go on. But
Yeah.
I think there were these very interesting courses that, I don't think you'd see everywhere.
Yeah, I
Oh
remember
wow.
I remember the first time I heard about behavioral economics was when I read an article. I think it was when I was starting college, and it was really interesting to me. I was kind of blown. I was talking about it to all my friends for like 2 3 days. But I think the course I went to in college never really gave me that exposure to behavioral economics, so it kind of just
Yeah.
died down my interest. But it's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, it's an upcoming field also, right? So I think
Yeah.
we'll see more and more of it, and that's a great thing that like at least everyone's taking interest in it. But yeah.
I also
Yeah.
know that you did a research thesis on career anxiety and self-efficacy in college students. So, can you tell us, like, how was your whole experience doing that research thesis, and maybe any surprising findings?
Sure. So the idea came to me during COVID, and I think I just had a lot of close friends. And while we've like sung songs about how great liberal arts is, one of the things that it does is if you're going to a college to study a particular thing, you know what you're going to do in your life. Like you sort of have already made that decision. Perhaps it's a bit early to be making it at 17 or 18, but it's done. When you do liberal arts, you get to pick your major maybe a year and a half, 2 years into it. There is that element of now what do I do? Like I've gotten into college, I've done all of these courses, but how does this lead into the rest of my life? And it especially during COVID, I saw that it threw up a lot of anxiety for people. There were parental expectations, people were really going through a lot in terms of trying to manage their situation. And while it's not mentioned in the title per se, but the intervention and my this also is geared towards interventions because I used to because of my background in behavioral science, I used to really anchor to this idea that people have the capacity to act for their own betterment. So we can get them to intervene, we can intervene to get them to behave in a manner that will help them. So as opposed to, say therapy or whatever, which is a little bit more of an active intervention from someone else and a more passive recipe, like receiving it yourself, you can get people to do things for themselves proactively. So one of the interventions that I thought would help was something called expressive writing. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, but please like look it up and think about doing it. But it's basically this idea that you can catharsize and reach a relatively better place mentally if you write. And if you write to certain prompts and whatever. So I wanted to basically develop an intervention that would help people who were going through this sort of career indecision and that feeling feel more self-efficacious, which is basically I think I can do this, I feel better about my abilities, etc. I just wondered if we got people to write and we gave them specific prompts that targeted this kind of a feeling, will it help? So surprising findings, I think two aspects about this that I really want to talk about. One was very heartbreaking because our N was limited, right? So in that kind of a thing, to see an intervention like fully show results is also hard. But I
Yeah.
had so much faith in all the work that we had done that I expected that obviously answers will come, and they didn't. So the
Yeah.
quant was off. Like it came, but it didn't come fully, and it really like broke me because a year of effort had gone into it. But what stayed with me was the qualitative stuff. So, you work for a year on something and then people start doing the intervention. You can see the, finger, you can hear the fingers typing away on laptops about whatever it is they're going through mentally. And I had so many people, once they were done with that intervention, come and tell me that I've never thought this much about my life and I've never thought this much about my career and I feel better. And I went back to college a year later and people used to tell me, I picked this placement over the other one, or I'm going to this college over the other one because of like it's the germ came in when you sort of got us to write. And that really stayed with me because it was like it was very validating as a thought. Like, you maybe scribble yourself when you're going through something and you think that will help someone else. And when they come back and tell you that, hey, listen, like you made a difference, I think that was a really, really gratifying feeling. And
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
must have felt like a more fulfilling goal than your initial goal. Yeah, actually,
yeah, like a plea
happening.
value will never feel that good, right? Like
Yeah.
someone said you've actually helped us make something of ourselves.
Yeah. That's actually so cool. Wait, Maya, how did you come up with the prompts? I guess the writing prompts. And what are some of those prompts?
Well, I'll have to remember, but basically there were broadly four sources of self-efficacy. One of them was past experiences. Like self-efficacy is just the idea that I believe I can do this. Now you can believe you can do something because you had a past experience of having done it. So I used to ask people to anchor back to a moment in their lives when they felt like they had managed to solve a similar problem. Like they were going through an indecision period, maybe when you're picking colleges or you were picking your classes in school or whatever, where they resolved something like this for themselves. The second one was around seeing someone else, like seeing role models, like you were asking me. Basically, talk about other people they've seen in their lives. People wrote about their parents, their teachers, their partners, even. That, I see my
Yeah.
girlfriend do this beautiful thing and I'm really inspired. And I thought that's so wonderful to come out. And such things. But there were these 4 research driven ways to
Yeah.
enhance someone's self-efficacy, and I tapped into those and I came up with sort of the prompts that I'm telling you.
Wow. Okay, that's actually so cool. Yeah, I think we should try this track today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you want me
Yeah.
to send you the prompts offline, that would be actually an interesting idea to try out. I've never thought about that, after the research ended, but I suppose we
Yeah.
could make
We
people
can
do
we can give you the long-term results. We'll contact you in 20-25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Also, Mania, I know like in when you were at Ashoka, you were, I think, like a teaching assistant for the Department of Political Science, and I think you also came up with this project called Ashoka Behavioral Insights
Yeah.
team, I guess, where like you put together a team to do stuff. So yeah, do you want to like tell us about how you decided to come up with this team? Why did you do it? Just like what does the team even do?
Sure. So, ABIT, or the Ashoka Students Behavioral Insights Team, as we're called, was the brainchild of a few people put together. It's not just me, but a friend, like a couple of friends of mine. We all got together with this idea that this behavioral science thing, kind of like how you guys were saying, right? I read this paper, whatever, and some professors at Ashoka started to take courses around it. And, a few of us thought that this is something worth pursuing. The idea behind the team was multi-pronged. One of them being that there's a lot said, written, done about this already that people don't really know about. Especially economics students are doing very, very theory-heavy courses without getting into the behavioral science and behavioral economics part of it. So publishing that, like writing insights, like making research papers more accessible. So this entire aspect of writing and making information accessible, this was not my vertical, but this I thought was a very important thing in terms of making noise for behavioral science. What I wanted to do specifically was that this happened around the time when I realized that I was academically very okay with, like I was getting good grades and I was happy enough with that. But at a personal level, I felt less fulfilled with psychology because and that's kind of why I don't really study it anymore, which is where I just felt like you treat it like a science, right? Because it's a science. We are in the business of healing people, and it's almost medical in that sense. Of course, it is. But when you do research, treating and applying blindly the scientific method to a discipline like psychology, where they're not chemical compounds, they're human people, they will not react the same way every time you test them. So replicability is an issue. So I just felt really, really done with research. And I felt a little bit like, and same thing happened with my thesis. Like you put in all this effort and people tell you it made a difference, but scientifically maybe it may not show up. And that's the kind of thing that I wanted to break. And ABIT was my way to do something really. So not just research it, but actually create interventions, actually, in fact, in some way consult. So we are seeing live problems on campus with, say, littering or food wastage or donations. Why are people behaving this way and not that way? And can we nudge them or trigger them or, influence them in a manner that they will do something differently? And so I thought that would be a very cool problem to solve, and creating a lab around it and actually trying to document our work would be a really cool way to do that. So that was the idea, that like we actually like use our rigor to make a difference and do something genuinely.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I think that's actually cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like the methodology is the hardest part of this kind of research, right? You have to come up with a lot of interesting stuff, innovative ways in which you can get the results you want, and that must be really challenging.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like that's where I think the dissonance with the discipline of it came, that I felt like there were ways to measure impact that weren't necessarily coherent with how psychology was being studied. So for example, if we can put a nudge somewhere and make people litter lesser or make people waste lesser food, and we measure that, the actual change. That's also a way of measuring impact. And I just felt like in this entire putting science into it, while it's so important, sometimes you lose out on that like really genuinely real thing that you can get done much more efficiently, just because we're trying to over engineer how methodologically sound will be.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that
So,
makes sense. Yeah. I also saw that there was like a whole LinkedIn page and like a Medium page with a lot of, research findings and all of that from the
yeah.
from
Yeah.
ABIT. So it was really interesting reading through it, especially, like I think I saw something about the recent elections and stuff. So, and just like a variety of different topics. So it sounds
Yep.
like you can apply the same like insights to like a lot of different.
Yeah. In fact, like political psychology, sports there's so much. And I just feel like it doesn't get covered adequately in ABIT. I'm really proud of how the team has sort of continued, because we're not part of it anymore, right? The founding team graduated like multiple years ago now. And these guys are actually working with real clients, people who come from outside other colleges. So they're actually doing some really good work. And we started during COVID, right? But these guys have made that an offline thing and made it really become exactly what we had envisioned, in fact more. So
Yeah.
like they cover the elections. I think we've done an election thing way back, and these guys have taken it to another level. So I think it's going really well, and can't be proud of.
Yeah.
I think what struck
Yeah.
me when I was going through the blog was there was so many articles related to social media or online communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a big part of this whole field has shifted towards the whole social media presence and social media communication, online
Wonder-
communication. Can you? I'm actually curious to know what you think about how maybe psychology itself has shifted over the years in terms of social media and technology.
I think that's very, very true. I mean, I'm not the most like up to date with exactly what the latest research and everything is, but I just think given how tech savvy everyone is becoming, yet like there are generational differences in how people use social media, it really is like they ought to be doing a lot more of that. And I remember a personal study I was part of was something that was done for the Center for Decision Research at the University of Chicago. They had tied up with an Ashoka Center, and I was volunteering with them. And they had done a very cool study actually on something quite similar, which is how people, when you're scrolling through Facebook, and this is a very different demographic to the uncles on WhatsApp or even you and me. Like these were sort of people from tier 2, tier 3 cities who only have that one smartphone, right? And so their primary app usage is actually Facebook. And we were going through that, and we were timing how much time people spend on every post, and like basically backtracking Facebook's algorithm to understand, okay, what are they going by. And we were trying to see how people's social identity, their religion, their caste, etc., play into what they are seeing, and then how much they like it. And I think those are also very relevant, because there is so much said about, we only engage in a bubble, we only interact with our own type of people and our own type of crowd. Are people even engaging with the content of somebody different? So that was a very, very cool research. A friend of mine really wanted to do a piece on fake news. Just the idea that can people differentiate if you show them two equally absurd sounding pieces of information? Are people able to anchor to which is news and which is not? So some very cool work that I've personally seen people do and also read about. So yeah,
I
there's
think
also, sorry, I just remembered one more. There's this paper we studied in that same behavioral economics course that actually talked about this is actually interesting. So it talked about information and the need for it. Like if you're curious or you're the kind of person who go and research something, and how we can curtail that need. So it did a study in China where they gave these students VPNs, and they tried to see without any VPNs to access basically the regular World Wide Web, not what the curated content is. And it was very 1984-esque, which is basically that after a point, unless incentivized, people don't care to look beyond what they're being shown. So that was a really interesting. This is a true like published paper that exists. I
Wow.
think it's called Brave New World on 1984 something. Like you can look it up, but very, very interesting research on people. If you shut out information for long enough, you kill the curiosity for it. Like we have this perception that everyone's always like dying to know what they don't know already, and curiosity is never ending. But there is a way that control can actually make you dead inside. Like you don't really want to know more, and you're okay with your finite
Wow.
sort of consumption. So like some very cool stuff going on in social media consumption. I think it's quite interesting.
Scrolling
Yeah,
is very interesting because I mean, I haven't done any study or something, but definitely I'm sure like people don't go through their day without scrolling at least once. Like
For sure.
it's
Yeah.
almost become like a lifestyle right now. So yeah, it's
yeah,
very interesting.
yeah. I feel like once I start scrolling, it's so hard for me to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
just
think
like
getting back to this last thing about like killing your need for information, like there's a chance that you're only seeing the same type of stuff and you're also not expanding. So it's actually very,
yeah,
very interesting. I also like this is part of the beauty of it. There's no real way to study all of everything that we've even said right now. Like it's so vast, but I think some very interesting work out there on this.
yeah. Wait, Mani, do you like have any, I guess, like psychology tips on how to like, I guess, break out of those loops? Or like, um, okay, I look, you want to say habits because it's almost like a habit. Once you like start doing it, it's hard to like, break out
They
of
have
those.
apps for that now. Yeah.
Okay, but I feel like apps don't always, they always don't help.
Yeah, I don't have any like we're all human and fallible, but I think being aware is I think a good way to start. I don't know. I mean, I'm also working on it, but also knowing like your boundaries for what is comfortable, what is not, and genuinely like introspecting on why am I doing what I'm doing. I think most of us don't even do that, right? So I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah,
And like reading
yeah.
this kind of stuff, I feel like if you guys are asking these kind of questions, you're already ahead of the curve. So.
Awesome, awesome. Or yeah. Thanks so much, Mani, for like talking about all the academic stuff.
No
Now let's
worries.
move on to like your professional, like a journey. And now with like studying psychology and doing all this, amazing research and like all of the projects, you decided to go into consulting to Bain and company. So you want to tell us about, why you chose Bain, why consulting, why this career path?
Yeah, I think I get that one a lot because it has been, like you said, a bit of an unconventional journey here. But I think I've touched upon it. I think there was a sort of dissatisfaction with not doing enough real stuff. And therefore, I have seen a lot of corporate India. My parents have really, they both are consultants in different capacities. So I have seen this to some degree. And I just felt like, I was interested in behavioral science. I was interested very much, by the way, in sports psychology. I thought that when I was thinking about psych and one of those early influences kind of thing that you brought up, I'm a humongous Test cricket fan, and like cricket in general,
No
but Test
way.
huge, huge. I can talk
It's
stats.
huge. Who's your favorite player, I guess?
Naveen
Like all,
he couldn't control himself.
No,
all
because
time.
both of us also watch cricket.
Yeah.
Sorry, I said all time, or do you mean right now?
All time man right now.
Okay, both.
I feel like it's very obvious, but I feel like Sachin Tendulkar, right? I feel really weird if I don't say that.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy Virat Kohli's batting. I think there is a certain, and I really enjoyed how when he was captain in the Test team, I really enjoyed how much fire he brought to that format. Because it wasn't really like in the sense a lot of people I think not even wasn't, it still isn't something that everyone loves. But I think that there was a certain zeal that started around that time, and at least for my generation. So I think that was something that I really enjoyed. And I love Jasprit Bumrah, man. Like I don't think just
Yeah.
Indian fast bowlers bowling like that is gratifying to another level. So yeah, but
Yeah.
coming back to my story, I think cricket was a huge influence in terms of things that I felt like psychology was being applied very actively when I used to watch Test cricket. I used to think the mental side of it, how players think, how they train, etc., was something I used to find super fascinating. So there were these various directions in which my life would have gone. And why consulting? I think it was simply that I thought that this would be a very real way to do something. It would require me to step out of my comfort zone, learn something new. I thought this entire economics, finance side of life I have not explored. And I'd started to reach that sort of thing that, okay, I don't want to become a therapist and I don't enjoy research. While I like reading about it, I don't personally love doing it. So, like I've already touched upon why. So I think when the placement cycle came along, I thought, okay, let me just see what happens. And one thing led to another, and I got a really wonderful sort of offer. And in terms of the place, the people, I think everything just, something just clicks. It clicked. And that's how the switch happened. I wanted to try something else. I wanted to try something real. I'd done a couple of internships that made me feel like, okay, I would enjoy working in an office and working in a corporate setup. And one thing led to another.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. How's it been so far, Bain?
It's been very, very, I feel like, like I said, I love to learn. I have never learned that much about that many things that fast. So definitely would in terms of, I feel like my brain is being utilized to a large extent, just picking up new things and learning about different sectors, about different, types of industries and different types of companies within that. I think that's been super cool. I worked with retail clients, I worked with a construction company, I worked with a social impact player. So, the kind of breadth of knowledge you can get into. And then if you do long-term projects, even the depth, you can really, really amass a lot. It's of course like it's tiring. Like it's a very high, like the demands of the job are quite high in terms of your time and your physical like ability. So there is a certain element of wow, okay, like my entire life is just work. But I think overall I've been really buoyed by and supported by some wonderful people. Like I'm not sure how much you guys know about Bain, but a lot of people will say that, like, no offense to any other firms, but we have the best people. And I haven't worked anywhere else, but we really have some wonderful people. So I think mostly I've had some really lovely mentors, and I've also picked up a bunch of extra stuff that I do. So I'm part of a culture club and I plan these parties and events. And so I'm getting like a full experience of doing things in a fun corporate India kind of a setup. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. I think that's really cool. Do you want to quickly tell the audience what consulting is in general? Because I feel like most people like don't know what consulting is and what consultants do.
Sure. So to answer the first question, I think consulting, there are a lot of types of consulting. Bain and Company, McKinsey, BCG, and even, the Big Four tend to do strategy and management consulting, which is basically we work with corporate clients and people who work in the industry. For example, let me take like a retailer, like we'll work with like a Macy's, right? And we'll try and solve a problem that they have. That's the broadest way to put it. So they'll come with a business problem. For example, well, we aren't getting enough people coming to our store, or certain sections are not selling enough, or we want to start this new category. How do we go about it? Or we are not saving enough money, we want to like cut our costs basically. How do we do that? So broadly we solve a problem like that for them. So our engagements are maybe 3 to 6 months, and like a team will go from like analysts and associate consultants, people of my level, to like senior partners who basically come in and just do the thinking and strategizing part of it. Well, whereas we will look at their financials and their data and do the analysis, crunch the data, give the answer. It's a large set of people, usually very, very smart people, who are working to solve this problem that people and clients especially perhaps don't have the time or the resources or the bandwidth really to focus on. So it's like a differentially important thing for them, but they don't have the internal capability or time perhaps to look at it. So they hire people to come in and solve that for them. In terms of my daily life, I think mostly I think days are spent, sometimes at the client side, sometimes with my own office. It's a very involved profession, so you're perpetually working with your team or with the client, solving something. So you could be working on an Excel and you're really cleaning up data, you're looking through revenue stats or something like that. There's a lot of research involved. So for example, maybe like the Macy's example, you'd want to look at, okay, what do competitors, what are they doing, or what did this company in another country do, etc. So there's a lot of like that secondary research kind of an element to it. Sometimes we're even doing calls with like industry experts to understand nuances. And there's a lot of slide making and making like insights look beautiful and presentable, and coming up with a story for it, because even clients, they have limited attention spans, so you have time to kind of capture their attention and do the right presentation. So yeah, that's kind of how your day looks like. It's usually a very long day doing a bunch of various tidbits of these, but that's a rough kind of structure.
It must also be fun trying to think of solutions for. So maybe that's maybe that's a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, like you are expected. See, the person sitting in front of you as a client has possibly worked in this industry for 25, 30 years, because they will typically be very senior people who you will see as in your sort of interactions, right? And you have come to this industry last week, and you are trying to ramp up on all of the stuff that they know already. Plus, you're trying to wow them with something that you only have come up with. So it's a hard job in terms of there is a lot consolidate and learn very quickly, and therefore I'm saying the learning curve is steep and extremely rewarding, because if you're ultimately coming up with something that's going to wow somebody 30 years into this space, you obviously have done a lot of learning along.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Like, do you think like it's like stuff like you learned at Ashoka is like applicable at Bain and Company and like a day-to-day job?
Very often, yes, and I think I've also been surprised by it. I've done some projects, like I said, a social impact here. I entered that particular piece not knowing that what they were doing on that problem statement, and suddenly I'm hearing the manager say something about we're applying social learning here, and we're going to find. So it was basically solving, not solving, like attempting to work with. I don't know how much you folks are familiar with sort of the problem in Punjab with stubble burning, essentially in India, where basically after they cut the crop, they burn the stubble because they want to, sow the next harvest very quickly, and that leads to smog in Delhi. So there's just a lot of pollution and air pollution caused because of it. So this player was trying to work with farmers. And one of the things we were talking about, we have to do social learning. We have to find an influencer farmer who has to then spread that information and disseminate it in various things. And the characteristics of this influencer farmer are X, Y, and Z. And they were looking at a psychology research report on how influence works, and what people find attractive in a person who has to market to them. Do they have to be similar to that person or very different, and things like that. So, I was like, hey, listen, like, hello, this is like my complete, like, this is what I like to do.
Yeah,
So this is a really cool one. And I'd actually gone down to Punjab and actually worked and talked to those people. Okay, why are you not adopting this practice or that practice? And if this person spoke to you, do you think it would make a difference, etc.? So that was fascinating. And this was maybe like an off case where actually they were using only psychology papers, but I mean my current project and the first one I ever did was with retailers. There it's applicable exactly like how I told you about the supermarket example from when I was a kid, right? Like there's a book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow, and that's about basically sometimes some parts of our brain are wired to think very quickly and we make decisions like this, and there are other parts of our brain that do math and do that read between the lines and thinks. And retailers need to target both, but very often we think from our system one, which is we think very quickly. So pricing, for example, you're seeing something or reacting to it, you're making a purchase or you're not. So there are these kind of things that really play up, and perhaps everyone's not talking about it in that manner, but I feel like I have a unique edge in that manner, that I at least feel very attracted to consumer research and talking to people and understanding what motivates them, because I link it back to, hey, listen, I studied this. My brain works in that manner. Perhaps it's not the conventional way of thinking, but I do think it adds that unique spike of, hey, I like consumers and I like thinking about how they think.
yeah. I think that's really good. It's always nice to like actually apply like stuff that one you're interested in and stuff that you learned about,
Yeah,
in work
yeah.
and stuff.
So comparing it to an IITian friend of mine who was working on a semiconductors case, we were talking about, okay, how she learned about semiconductors and I learned about people, and we both are managing somehow to use it. So that it's the beauty of like consulting for how wide the spectrum is in terms of what is relevant. We even have doctors, by the way, at Bain who work in the healthcare practice. So it's actually like a very varied set of people.
Do you have any advice for young professionals who maybe want to get into behavioral sciences or psychology or something like that, since you've been through it?
Yeah, I think lesser expectations from the actual impact of it, because I think that the more the brighter the people are that actually are building up a scientific base for it, the more impact we will eventually see. So keeping that mindset of being patient and actually like pushing through the research and getting through it, I think the people I know, some of my closest friends who do it and who still work in psychology, are the kinds of people who really have that element of they are patient with results. And it's a science, but it's a new science, and we're really like sometimes I feel like we've been born 200 years too early in this discipline. Maybe like later we will have more, but it will take our generation to kind of build that up. And create the scientific basis for a lot of the impact that we hope to create. So I think holding on to that would be great.
I think with your line of work, you're probably thinking a lot about how your work impacts society or has a positive change on society. So, do you want to talk to us about that for a bit? Do you think about it a lot?
Yeah, I try to think about that as frequently as I possibly can. Like, what is this achieving? And I think I derive a lot of the gratification I personally feel from work, knowing that it's impacting and it's doing something. So there are two elements to it, right? The first being that in terms of genuinely doing social impact and doing something that's good for society. Bain does a lot of social impact projects. I still feel like we should do more. I've done a few and I want to do more of those for sure. But I personally also want to explore what else I like beyond consulting and beyond simply this. So I'm in fact starting what we call an externship, which is basically like an internship, but you're still employed at Bain. You eventually come back. But I'm starting something at an impact investing kind of a place. Impact investing and social entrepreneurship is their basic model, and they're working with startups that are looking to increase livelihood creation and basically not eradicate, but like, help the poverty problem in India. And so that's something that I want to see. Like, what if I'll enjoy that in terms of looking at impact investing, looking at why people, where people will put their money. Can we kind of generate enough capital for funds for places that are doing well, doing a lot of good for society? So that's one of the ideas that, I want to explore, which is what I'm kind of going to do starting July for a few months. But also, having said that, like, a way that I'm starting to see that my work has to impact is seeing what we do for clients. I was working with a construction company very recently, and we were advising, go into this sector or go into that sector, like go into say water or go into buildings or go into gas or whatever it is, and like come and make infrastructure for this kind of a sector. And I was thinking about, if this company decides to do this, can you imagine it's a humongous company, right? Multiple $1 million, possibly a few $1 billion. And if they start doing this, the livelihood creation that happen, the economic growth that will come from that. I think working in a firm as large as Bain gives you access to clients who can truly make a difference. So if we are making a difference to them, they are making a difference to India. And I think that's in itself a story. So also reminding myself that, while I can do my small elements of social impact and actually doing societal good, our work is large, right? And therefore I try to ground myself in the fact that we're contributing to something larger and we are doing something. But yeah, personally, for my personal gratification, I will be exploring other avenues also for giving back.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. Like I think, like you mentioned, when you advise those clients in the right direction, that, like it trickles down,
Yeah.
to the whole economy and stuff. So
Yeah.
that's true. I have another question. So like, are there any like books, maybe podcasts or like resources that have helped you or like influenced your thinking, or like just media, but that you recommend to others?
Yeah, I mentioned once I really loved Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. The expressive writing idea came from this book on it by James Pennebaker. So those are some books. I think also like I said, I'm very, very taken by sport. So there's this book called Open by Andre Agassi. I think that's a very good book. Internalize exactly what, like, how motivation works for a person and how you can get out of a dark place by sort of focusing on what you need to do. So there are some of these books. Podcasts I wish I could listen to a little bit more. I really want to start, but it's not something that I have been able to do very, very, very religiously. But yeah, these are some books that I think when you say shape my thinking, definitely some of these.
One more question. Thinking about your journey, do you have any specific takeaway that you'd like others to know, or just listeners in general who are learning from your journey? Just some specific takeaway from your whole journey.
Yes, I think one thing that see, obviously, like these mind-blowing moments in life where you realize that, this is something I have to contribute and I think will make a difference to people. I'm still very young. Like, I'm sure there will be more to say eventually. But something that I have very recently sort of made my peace with and I'm still working on to some extent, is just the idea that anything you do in life, you're choosing. So sometimes, you're stuck in a project where you're not feeling great or things are not going your way, and I found a lot of peace in this idea that if you're doing this job, you are choosing every morning to wake up and come. You are not. No one is forcing this on me, and I think my parents have a lot to do with this idea that they have just put so much faith in me all the time and said, you know what, you can do whatever you set your heart to, and we are always here and all that. I think for me, that one idea that, if I am choosing to let something go badly, I am choosing to this is happening to me because I'm choosing. And always sort of remembering that if you want to leave, you will choose to leave. And if you want to stay, you're choosing to stay. Especially with a job that demands so much of your time and energy, if this is something that people want to do with consulting, that is something I will say that, you should only do it if you're happy. And the moment it stops making you happy, you should remember that you have a choice. I think that's a very empowering thought for me, because otherwise, you feel like a victim the entire time. Like you can start feeling like, okay, this college of mine is not giving me everything I want, or this job is not giving me everything I want. But I feel like just feeling like it's your decision, and you can choose differently also is something that I would recommend people reflect on and actually realize. I'm still working on it, but that's something that I think can help.
I think it's definitely something that I think I've been trying to work on it, because it's almost like I think, like you mentioned, like it's almost like you don't think that everything's happening to you, but you're like, you're the person actually making those decisions.
Yeah.
And I think like you rightly said, like you shouldn't feel like you're the victim, because like you're the person actually choosing to do what you do. So I think that's good advice.
Yeah, especially when it comes to your work and stuff like that, truly you're choosing. You can't choose everything in life that happens to you, but this is one of those things you can control, right? So
yeah, that's true. Awesome. Okay, Mani, this is going to be the last question. I'll make it a little more fun for you, because I know all the other questions are a little more like I think like deep and kind of related. Because the question is, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would it be? I'm guessing Virat Kohli, because you love cricket so much. But
no, I don't. I actually realized. I mean, no offense to anybody who plays sport or whatever, but I feel like I don't know if they're very good conversationalists. Maybe Virat Kohli might be an exception. I haven't heard enough of him, but I feel like maybe for dinner I might pick someone different. Like watching a match, or like I would happily watch Virat Kohli or any of these people I mentioned for hours. But dinner, interesting. Can I change your question a little bit and like pick somebody I would rather, like, if I could go back in time and do a thing, can I answer that question? Because that one I have a very clear answer to.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I rather in terms of dinner also I can twist it, but basically I don't know if you guys have heard of this Sufi singer called Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan.
Yes. Yeah. Very,
very nice. One of my life saddest realities is that he passed away 2 years before I was born, and I am the hugest listener. So it comes from my interest in Hindustani classical music, etc. But if I could have a dinner where he was there and happily singing or something of that sort, I would be the most grateful. But in terms of speaking of people who are alive, yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I think Daniel Kahneman would be a great person. I think I mentioned his book as well. I believe, I don't believe he's alive, but yeah, but he recently passed away. But he would be a fantastic person to talk to, because I think, again, he combines that idea of psychology and economic theory and why people behave the way that they do so beautifully. So yeah, I think I would go with him. But if I wanted to just do what I wanted to do and not really think about work, then I think I would want to listen to some good music.
Yeah, that's bad. I think it almost points at the two things that are very important to you. Like obviously economics and social sciences, and psychology and like music and like the arts and stuff. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, awesome. Okay, yeah, thanks so much, Manya, for joining us today. And yeah, I think I'm sure like everyone learned so much from you, and yeah, both me and Kathy had so much fun talking to you. So thank you.
I feel like we're probably gonna do another podcast with you in 5 years, and you would have done 10 different things that are really interesting.
Yeah, I hope so too. I feel like I wish I was doing more. Like these days, I'm just working, but I'm really glad that you guys had a good time. I had great fun doing this. And like some really insightful questions. I haven't thought so much about things in a bit, so I think it really gave me a chance also to reflect. Yeah, thank you.